The moment she walked through my front door, I knew my life was over. Not in the dramatic way you see in movies. No gasping, no fainting, no glass shattering on the floor. It was quieter than that. Slower. Like watching a car accident unfold in slow motion, knowing you can't stop it, knowing the impact is coming and all you can do is grip the steering wheel and wait. Her name was Vanessa. My son, my beautiful 28-year-old boy Marcus, had his arm around her waist like she was the most precious thing he'd ever held. His face was glowing, that particular glow a man gets when he thinks he's found the one. I know that glow. I saw it on his father's face 32 years ago, the night he proposed to me in my mother's kitchen with a ring he'd saved for 2 years to buy. "Mom," Marcus said, beaming. "This is Vanessa. The woman I'm going to marry." I smiled. I extended my hand. I said, "Welcome to our home." But inside I was screaming. Because I recognized her. Not from a photo album. Not from some distant memory of a college friend or a coworker's daughter. I recognized her from the messages I'd found on my husband's phone 6 months ago. Messages I was never supposed to see. Messages from a contact saved only as V. And now V was standing in my living room, wearing a cream-colored blouse and a modest gold necklace, smiling at me like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. My husband, Gerald, stood 3 feet behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel his panic radiating off him like heat from a furnace. I could hear the slight hitch in his breathing, the way he cleared his throat. Once, twice, trying to compose himself. She didn't look at him. Not once. He was too smart for that. But I saw her fingers tighten just slightly around her clutch purse. I saw the micro-expression that flickered across her face. Recognition, fear, calculation, before the mask slipped back into place. She knew exactly who I was. And I knew exactly who she was. The question was, what was I going to do about it? Let me take you back. Before the dinner. Before Vanessa. Before my world cracked down the middle like an egg dropped on concrete. My name is Lorraine Mitchell. I'm 54 years old. I've been married to Gerald Mitchell for 32 years. We have one son, Marcus, who is the light of my life. The reason I wake up in the morning, the reason I never gave up on anything. For most of those 32 years I thought I had a good marriage. Not perfect, no marriage is ideal, but solid. Dependable. The kind of marriage where you know your husband will bring you coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, where you finish each other's sentences, where you've weathered enough storms together that you think you're unshakable. Gerald worked in pharmaceutical sales for 28 years before taking an early retirement package 3 years ago. I worked as an administrative assistant at a law firm downtown until I retired last year. We lived in the same house in suburban Atlanta for 25 years. A red brick colonial with white shutters and a magnolia tree in the front yard that blooms every spring like clockwork. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had dinner together every night. We watched the news at 6 and Jeopardy at 7. We went to church on Sundays and had Marcus over for dinner at least twice a month. It was a good life. A quiet life. That could be the problem. Quiet is another word for invisible. Gerald had changed in the past few years. Small changes that I noticed but didn't examine too closely. He started going to the gym more often. He bought new cologne, something musky and expensive that didn't smell like him. He got a new phone and kept it face down on the table, something he'd never done before. I told myself it was the retirement adjustment. I told myself he was trying to stay young, stay healthy, stay relevant. Men his age do that. They buy sports cars, get hair plugs and join CrossFit. It's a phase. It passes. I didn't want to be one of those wives. The suspicious ones. The paranoid ones. The ones who check phones, sniff callers and hire private investigators. I trusted Gerald. I had given him 32 years of my life and I believed, truly believed, that he would never betray that. I was wrong. The first time I noticed something truly off was 6 months before that dinner. It was a Tuesday evening. Gerald was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once, twice, 3 times in quick succession. Usually I would have ignored it. But something made me look. The screen was locked, but the notification preview showed a message from someone named V. "I can still taste you. When can I see you again?" I stared at those words until the screen went dark. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. A wrong number, a prank, something explainable. But deep in my gut, in that place where women know things before their minds catch up, I knew. I knew my husband was having an affair. I didn't confront him that night. I couldn't. My voice wouldn't work. My brain wouldn't process. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to him hum in the shower like nothing was wrong. In the morning I acted normally. I made breakfast. I kissed his cheek. I waved goodbye as he drove off to his gym session. And then I went back upstairs, sat on the edge of our bed and cried until I couldn't breathe. For the next 2 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I checked his phone whenever he left it unattended, but he'd changed the passcode. I logged into our phone account online and pulled the call records, but V only texted, never called. I searched his email, his social media, his browser history. Nothing. He was careful. Too careful. But not careful enough. 3 weeks after that first message, I found my opening. Gerald had gone out to meet the guys for poker night. A tradition that had conveniently become more frequent over the past year. I didn't believe him anymore, but I smiled and told him to have fun. I kissed his cheek. I waved from the porch. Then I went inside and waited. He had a second phone. I'd suspected it for a while. The way he sometimes patted his jacket pocket instead of his pants, where he always kept his regular phone. The way he occasionally glanced at something in his car before coming inside. Small things. Invisible things. The kind of things only a wife who's been watching would notice. That night I searched the house. Not frantically, methodically. I went through his home office, his closet, and his toolbox in the garage. I checked inside old shoes, behind books on the shelf, inside the pockets of winter coats he hadn't worn in months. I found it in a hollowed-out Bible. A hollowed-out Bible, sitting on the top shelf of his closet, was covered in dust like it hadn't been touched in years. But when I lifted it, it was too light. When I opened it, the pages had been cut out in a rectangle, and nestled inside was a cheap prepaid phone. The kind you buy at a gas station with cash. My hands trembled as I turned it on. The battery was at 40%. There was no passcode. I opened the messages. There was only one contact. V. I scrolled through months of conversations. My eyes burned. My chest ached. But I read every single word. The messages were explicit. Things I can't repeat without feeling sick. But worse than the physical descriptions were the emotional ones. The I miss you messages. The you're the only one who understands me messages. The I wish I could wake up next to you every morning messages. Gerald had written those words. My husband of 32 years. The man who stood beside me at our son's christening. The man who held my hand when my mother died. The man who promised before God and our families to forsake all others. He had written, I love you, to another woman. Not me. Her. I sat on the closet floor for an hour, clutching that phone, reading and rereading until the words blurred together. I wanted to throw it. I tried to smash it against the wall. I tried to call the number and scream at whoever answered. But I didn't. Something cold settled inside me. Something patient. Something calculating. I took screenshots. I forwarded key messages to my own email. Then I erased the evidence of my search, put the phone back exactly where I found it, and closed the Bible. I went downstairs, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat in the dark living room until I heard Gerald's car pull into the driveway at 11:47 p.m. Hey honey, he said, kissing the top of my head. You're still up. Couldn't sleep, I said. How was poker? Good. I won $40. He smiled at me. That same smile I'd loved for 3 decades. And I smiled back. I'm proud of you, I said. He had no idea what I knew. And I intended to keep it that way, until the time was right. For the next 5 months I lived a double life. On the surface I was Lorraine Mitchell, devoted wife, loving mother, active church member. I cooked dinners. I attended the book club. I planted new roses in the front garden and hosted Easter brunch like nothing was wrong. But underneath I was gathering ammunition. I hired a private investigator. A woman named Patricia Chin, recommended by a friend of a friend who had gone through her own divorce. Patricia was discreet, professional, and merciless. Within 2 weeks she had photographs. Gerald was at a restaurant with a young, beautiful woman with long dark hair and a smile that could sell anything. Gerald was holding her hand across the table. Gerald is kissing her in a parking lot. Gerald entered a hotel room on a Tuesday afternoon, telling me he had a doctor's appointment. Her name is Vanessa Brooks, Patricia told me over coffee at a cafe far from my neighborhood. She's 31. Works as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup downtown. Single, no kids. Lives in a condo in Midtown. She slid a folder across the table. According to credit card records, your husband has been paying her rent for the past 8 months. I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, credit card receipts, and photos of Vanessa's building. 8 months. He'd been supporting her for 8 months while I clipped coupons and worried about our retirement savings. How did they meet? I asked. My voice was steady. I surprised myself. Best I can tell, at a conference about 2 years ago. The affair started around 18 months ago. 18 months. A year and a half of lies. A year and a half of fake poker nights and phantom doctor's appointments. A year and a half of looking me in the eye and saying, "I love you," while texting another woman under the table. Fake Patricia. I paid her in cash. I drove home in silence, that folder sitting on the passenger seat like a bomb waiting to detonate. For 2 more months I did nothing. I watched. I waited. I studied Gerald like a specimen under glass, noting every lie, every excuse, and every tender moment that now felt like a performance. I wondered if anything had ever been real. If our entire marriage was just an extended audition for a role he never wanted. But I couldn't act yet. I didn't know what I was waiting for. A sign, maybe. A moment. The right time. Then Marcus called. "Mom," he said, his voice bubbling with excitement. "I have news. Big news. I'm bringing someone home for dinner on Saturday. Someone special." My heart lifted, the first genuine joy I'd felt in months. "That's wonderful, honey. What's her name?" "Vanessa," he said. "Her name is Vanessa. Mom, I think she's the one." The world stopped. I gripped the kitchen counter to keep from falling. "Mom? You there?" "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I'm here. Saturday sounds perfect." I hung up the phone. I stood in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the wall, feeling something inside me shift. Not broken. I'd already broken months ago. This was something else. This was rage crystallizing into purpose. My husband's mistress was dating my son. And she was coming to my house for dinner. The days between that phone call and Saturday felt like walking through water. Every movement was slow, heavy, and deliberate. I went through the motions of life, grocery shopping, laundry, watering my roses, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I was planning. Not revenge exactly. At least that's not what I called it. I called it truth. The truth was coming whether anyone wanted it or not, and I was going to open the door and let it walk in. Gerald noticed nothing. He was too distracted. Phone buzzing constantly, mysterious errands that took 2 hours, long showers with the door locked. I wondered if he was warning Vanessa. I asked if they had a plan. Maybe they thought they could pull this off. Perhaps she had convinced him that I would never recognize her. That a 54-year-old homemaker wouldn't connect the dots between a blurry photo on a private investigator's report and the polished woman standing in her living room. They underestimated me. They all do. Saturday arrived with the kind of cruel perfection that only fate can orchestrate. The sky was clear and blue. The magnolia tree was in full bloom, its white blossoms floating down like confetti. The house smelled like roasted chicken and fresh bread, Marcus's favorites. I set the table with my grandmother's china. 4 place settings. Cloth napkins folded into fans. Candles lit in the center, casting a warm, flickering glow. It looked like a celebration. It was a funeral. Gerald came downstairs at 5:30, adjusting his collar, reeking of that expensive cologne he'd started wearing. He looked nervous. His eyes kept darting to his phone. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Fine," he said too quickly. "Just excited to meet Marcus's girlfriend." Girlfriend. The word made my stomach turn. "I'm sure she's lovely," I said. He didn't look at me. At exactly 6 p.m. the doorbell rang. I smoothed my dress, a deep burgundy that I'd bought specifically for this occasion, and walked to the door. Gerald hung back, pretending to adjust a picture frame, pretending he wasn't terrified. I opened the door, and there she was. Vanessa Brooks was even more beautiful in person than in the photographs. Tall and slender, with long dark hair that fell in perfect waves over her shoulders. Her skin was flawless. Her makeup was subtle but expertly applied. She wore a cream silk blouse tucked into high-waisted trousers, and her smile was warm, practiced, and designed to disarm. But her eyes betrayed her. The moment she saw me, I watched recognition flash across her face. Fast, gone in an instant, replaced by that smooth, professional mask. But I caught it. I saw the flicker of panic, the slight widening of her pupils, and the almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. He knew. She knew exactly who I was. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, extending her hand. Her voice was honeyed and confident. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you. Marcus talks about you constantly." I took her hand. Her palm was cold and slightly damp. "Welcome to our home, Vanessa," I said, squeezing just a little too hard. "We've been looking forward to this." Marcus stood beside her, oblivious, radiating happiness. He had his father's eyes, warm, trusting, and incapable of seeing the wolves among the sheep. "Mom, isn't she amazing?" he said, wrapping his arm around Vanessa's waist. "She certainly is," I said. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." The next hour was an exercise in performance. We sat at the dining table, Gerald at the head, me at the opposite end, and Marcus and Vanessa on either side. The chicken was passed. Wine was poured. Compliments were exchanged about the meal, the house, and the lovely weather. Vanessa was good. I'll give her that. She played the part of the devoted girlfriend flawlessly. She laughed at Marcus's jokes. She asked me questions about my gardening, my book club, and my life. She touched Marcus's arm with casual intimacy, leaned into him when he spoke, and gazed at him with what looked like genuine adoration. But she never once looked at Gerald. Not directly. Not for more than a split second. And Gerald was a mess. He knocked over his water glass twice. He laughed too loudly at things that weren't funny. He kept clearing his throat, excusing himself to refill drinks that didn't need refilling. His forehead glistened with sweat despite the air conditioning running full blast. Marcus noticed nothing. He was too busy being in love. "So, Vanessa," I said, cutting into my chicken with surgical precision, "how did you and Marcus meet?" "Oh," she said, smiling that perfect smile. "We met at a coffee shop, actually. I was working on my laptop and he spilled his latte on my keyboard." Marcus groaned. "She's never going to let me live that down." "It was adorable," Vanessa said, patting his hand. He was so embarrassed. "He bought me a new laptop on the spot." "That's my boy," Gerald said, his voice cracking slightly. "Always the gentleman." I watched him squirm. "And what do you do for work, Vanessa?" I asked. "I'm a marketing coordinator. For a tech startup downtown." "How exciting. And how long have you been doing that?" "About 3 years now." 3 years, I repeated, nodding slowly. "That's a long time. You must have quite a network by now. Meet a lot of people in that field, I imagine." "I do," she said carefully. "It's a very social industry." "I'm sure." I took a sip of wine. "And tell me, have you ever done any work with pharmaceutical companies?" The table went silent. Vanessa's smile froze. Just for a moment. Just long enough for me to see the crack in her armor. "I'm sorry," she said. "Pharmaceutical companies," I repeated. "My husband Gerald used to work in that industry. Sales. For almost 30 years. I thought maybe you might have crossed paths at some conference or networking event." I looked at Gerald. His face was the color of ash. "No," Vanessa said, her voice tighter now. "I don't think so. My work is mostly in consumer tech." I nodded. Strange. He just looked so familiar to me. I could have sworn I'd seen your face somewhere before. Marcus laughed nervously. "Mom, are you saying she has a famous face? Should I be worried about competition?" "Not at all, sweetheart," I said, patting his hand. "I'm sure it's just my imagination." I smiled at Vanessa. She didn't smile back. Gerald excused himself to the bathroom. He was gone for 12 minutes. Dinner continued in a haze of forced normalcy. When Gerald returned from the bathroom, his face was damp. He'd splashed water on it, tried to compose himself. But his hands were shaking as he picked up his fork. He couldn't meet my eyes. He couldn't meet Vanessa's eyes either. He just stared at his plate, pushing food around like a child, hoping dinner would end. Vanessa had recovered her composure. She was laughing again, touching Marcus's arm and complimenting my cooking. But there was something brittle beneath her charm now. A tightness around her mouth. A watchfulness in her eyes. She knew the game had changed. She didn't know what I was going to do next. Neither did I, to be honest. Part of me wanted to flip the table over and scream the truth. Part of me wanted to drag Gerald into the living room and demand answers. Part of me wanted to pull Marcus aside and shatter his heart with the words that were burning a hole in my chest. But I didn't do any of those things. Because I realized something, sitting there at my grandmother's table with candles flickering and my family arranged around me like actors in a play. This wasn't just about Gerald. This wasn't just about Vanessa. This was about Marcus. My son. My baby. The boy I'd nursed through fevers and heartbreaks and failures. The man who had finally found someone he wanted to spend his life with. He deserved the truth. But he deserved to hear it the right way. Not in a screaming match. Not in a scene that would traumatize him forever. He deserved dignity. He deserved facts. He deserved the chance to process this without having to watch his mother lose her mind at the dinner table. So I waited. I waited through the main course. I waited through Gerald's fumbling attempts at small talk. I waited through Vanessa's increasingly desperate performance of the perfect girlfriend. And then as I stood to clear the plates, I made my move. "Vanessa," I said sweetly, "would you mind helping me in the kitchen? I'd love to get to know you better while we prepare dessert." Marcus beamed. "That's a great idea, Mom." Vanessa hesitated just a fraction of a second, then nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. I'd be happy to help." She followed me into the kitchen. I closed the door behind us. The kitchen was quiet. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of Marcus and Gerald talking in the dining room. Vanessa stood near the counter, her arms crossed, her mask finally slipping. Up close, I could see the fear in her eyes. Real fear barely contained beneath that polished exterior. "Mrs. Mitchell," she began. "Don't." My voice was calm, steady, ice cold. "Don't insult me by lying. Not here. Not now." She swallowed hard. Her composure cracked another inch. "I know who you are," I said. "I know what you've done. I've known for 6 months. I have photographs. I have text messages. I have credit card statements showing my husband has been paying your rent." Vanessa's face went white. "So let's skip the part where you pretend we've never met," I continued. "Let's skip the part where you claim it was just a mistake, or that it didn't mean anything. I want to know one thing and one thing only." I stepped closer. Close enough to see her pulse jumping in her throat. "Does my son know?" Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. Real tears, I think, though with a woman like her it was hard to tell. "No," she whispered. "Marcus doesn't know anything. I swear." "Then explain to me how you ended up dating my son while sleeping with his father." She flinched as I slapped her. It wasn't planned," she said, her voice trembling. "I met Marcus first. At the coffee shop. That part was true. We went on a few dates. I really liked him. And then he invited me to a work event. Some networking thing for his company. Gerald was there." She closed her eyes. "Gerald recognized me. From the conference where we first met. 2 years ago. Before Marcus. Before any of this. We had a thing. A brief thing. I ended it. I moved on. I thought he had too. But he hadn't," I said. "No." She shook her head. "He started texting me. Calling me. Showing up at my office. He said he couldn't stop thinking about me. He said his marriage was dead. He said he loved you." She nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "And you believed him?" "I wanted to," she whispered. "I know how that sounds. I know I'm the villain in this story. But Gerald, he made me feel special. But he said he was going to leave you. He said we'd be together. And Marcus." She looked at the floor. I thought if I stayed with Marcus I could stay close to Gerald. I know how twisted that sounds. I know it's wrong. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. And then Marcus proposed and Gerald started pulling away and "You panicked," I finished. "Yes." I stood there looking at this woman, this beautiful, broken, desperate woman, and I felt something unexpected. Not sympathy exactly. Not forgiveness. But recognition. I recognized the hunger in her eyes. The need to be loved. The willingness to destroy everything for a man who would never leave his wife, no matter what lies he whispered in the dark. Gerald had done this. Gerald had created this monster. And now we all have to live with the consequences. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. You're going to go back into that dining room. You're going to smile. You're going to eat dessert. And then you're going to leave. Vanessa looked up, confused. Tomorrow, I continued, you're going to break up with my son. You're going to tell him you're not ready for marriage. You're going to make it clean and kind and final. And then you're going to disappear from his life forever. And if I don't? I smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Then I'll show Marcus everything. The photos. The texts. The hotel receipts. I'll show him exactly who you are and exactly what you did. And I promise you, Vanessa, he will never look at you the same way again. She stared at me for a long moment. What about Gerald? She asked. Gerald is my problem, I said. Not yours. Not anymore. We returned to the dining room with strawberry shortcake and fresh whipped cream. I carried the plates. Vanessa took the serving spoons. Her hands were trembling slightly, but she had composed her face into something resembling normalcy. I had to admire her discipline even as I despised everything she represented. Marcus looked up as we entered, his face bright with love and ignorance. Everything okay? He asked. You two were in there a while. Just getting to know each other, I said, setting his plate in front of him. Girl talk. Gerald watched us with the eyes of a cornered animal. He knew something had happened in that kitchen. He didn't know what. I sat down at my end of the table. I picked up my fork. I took a small bite of a strawberry, letting the sweetness dissolve on my tongue. This is delicious, Mom, Marcus said. Thank you, sweetheart. The conversation resumed, lighter now, surface level. Marcus talked about his job. Vanessa nodded along, contributing just enough to seem engaged. Gerald said almost nothing. I waited. I waited until the plates were nearly empty. Until the candles had burned down another inch. Until the silence between topics stretched just a beat too long. Then I spoke. Vanessa, I said, my voice perfectly pleasant. I have one more question for you. I hope you don't mind. She looked up. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. I smiled. When you're at a hotel with a married man, I said, do you prefer rooms with a view, or is that not something you pay attention to? The words landed like a grenade. Marcus laughed. A confused, nervous laugh. Mom, what are you talking about? Vanessa's face went from pale to gray. Gerald stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Lorraine, that's enough. Sit down, Gerald, I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 32 years. Sit down and let me finish. He didn't sit. But he didn't move either. He just stood there, frozen, caught between fight and flight. Marcus, I said, turning to my son, I need to tell you something. And I need you to listen. Really listen. Mom, you're scaring me. I know, baby. I'm sorry. But you deserve the truth. I reached into my pocket, where I had been keeping a folded piece of paper all evening, and I pulled out a photograph. One of the clearest ones Patricia had taken. Gerald and Vanessa kissing in a parking lot, his hands on her waist, her arms around his neck. I slid it across the table to Marcus. This was taken 4 months ago, I said. Outside the Marriott on Peachtree Street. At 2:47 in the afternoon. Your father told me he was at the doctor. Marcus picked up the photograph. His brow furrowed. His lips moved but no sound came out. That's... He whispered. That's Dad. Yes. And that's... He looked up at Vanessa. His eyes were filling with tears. That's you. Vanessa said nothing. She couldn't. The mask had shattered completely. Tears were streaming down her face and she was shaking. Really shaking, like a leaf in a hurricane. I don't understand, Marcus said, his voice cracking. I don't... How is this possible? When did... How long? 18 months, I said gently. According to the investigator I hired. They've been seeing each other for 18 months. Before me. Marcus looked at Vanessa, desperate for some explanation that would make this make sense. You knew my father before you met me? She nodded, barely perceptibly. And you stayed with me, while you were... Marcus, I can explain, Vanessa started. Don't. Marcus slammed his palm on the table. The plates rattled. The candles flickered. Don't you dare explain. Don't you dare say another word to me. He turned to his father. Dad. Gerald's face had crumbled. He looked old, older than I'd ever seen him. The confident, charming man I'd married had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow shell of guilt and cowardice. Son, I never meant for any of this. You never meant to? Marcus laughed, a horrible broken sound. You slept with my girlfriend, my fiancée, for a year and a half. And you never meant for it to happen. It was complicated, Gerald said weakly. She and I, we had history. Before you. I tried to end it. When? Marcus demanded. When did you try to end it? Before you paid her rent? Before you texted her that you loved her? Before she showed up at our front door wearing my ring? Gerald had no answer. Marcus turned to me. You knew, he said. It wasn't a question. You knew about this. For how long? 6 months, I admitted. I found messages on your father's phone. I hired someone to investigate. I was going to confront him, but then you called. You told me you were bringing her home. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me walk in here like an idiot? I reached across the table and took his hand. Because I wasn't sure, I said. I knew about the affair. I didn't know it was the same woman until she walked through that door. And when I realized, I needed to be certain. I needed to see them together. I needed to give you the truth with evidence, not just accusations. Marcus pulled his hand away. Not in anger, in devastation. I was going to marry her, he whispered. I bought a ring. I had a whole speech planned. I thought she was the one. I know, baby. I'm so sorry. He looked at Vanessa one last time. She was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks, all pretense of composure abandoned. Get out, Marcus said. His voice was flat. Get out of my mother's house. And never contact me again. Vanessa stood. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands. She walked toward the door, then paused. Marcus, please. Out. She left. The front door closed behind her with a soft click. Marcus turned to his father. And you, he said. I don't even know what to say to you. Gerald reached out. Son. Don't. Marcus stepped back. Don't touch me. Don't call me. I need to not be here right now. He grabbed his jacket from the chair and walked toward the door. Marcus, I called. Where are you going? He stopped, his hand on the doorknob. I don't know, Mom, he said without turning around. But anywhere is better than here. The door opened. The door closed. And then there were two. The house was silent. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. The kind that makes you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing, and the creak of the floorboards beneath your feet. Gerald stood at the head of the table, frozen. The candles had burned down to nubs. The strawberry shortcake sat untouched, the whipped cream slowly deflating. I didn't move. I just watched him. For 32 years I had looked at this man and seen a husband, a partner, a father. Now I looked at him and saw a stranger, a coward wearing a familiar face. Lorraine, he finally said. His voice was hoarse. Please. Let me explain. Explain. I repeated the word as if it were foreign. Explain what, Gerald? How have you been sleeping with a woman half your age? How have you been paying her rent with our retirement savings? How could you let our son bring her into this house, into our home, knowing what you'd done? I didn't know she was dating Marcus, he said quickly. Not at first. When I found out, I tried to end it. I told her it was over. But she wouldn't let go. She started showing up at places I would be. She threatened to tell you. I panicked. You panicked, I interrupted. For 18 months. You panicked every Tuesday afternoon at the Marriott. You panicked every time you texted her, I love you. You panicked every time you lied to my face and told me you were at the gym. Gerald's face crumpled. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I love you, Lorraine. I've always loved you. What happened with Vanessa? It was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk, I said. A mistake is missing an anniversary. This was a choice. You made it every single day for a year and a half. You looked at me every morning and every night, and you chose to keep lying. I know. I know. He was crying now, actual tears rolling down his cheeks. But I can change. I can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can start over. Please, Lorraine. Please don't throw away 32 years because of this. I stood up slowly. My joints ached. My heart ached. Everything ached. You threw away 32 years, I said. Not me. You. I walked past him toward the living room. He followed, desperate. What are you going to do? He asked. Where are you going? I'm going to bed, I said. In the guest room. And tomorrow I'm calling a lawyer. A lawyer? Lorraine, please. We're done, Gerald. I turned to face him one last time. I don't hate you. I don't have the energy for hate. But I am finished being the fool in your story. I'm finished wondering where you really are, who you're really texting, and whether any of this was ever real. It was real, he pleaded. Our marriage was real. Our family was real. Was it? I asked. Because from where I'm standing it looks like a 32-year performance. And I'm tired of clapping. I walked upstairs. I locked the guest room door. I lay down on the cold sheets and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The news spread faster than I expected. By Monday morning, Marcus had told his sister, my daughter Claire, who lived in Chicago with her husband and 2 kids. Claire called me at 7 a.m. crying, demanding answers. Is it true? She asked. Did Dad really? Yes, I said. It's true. With Marcus's girlfriend? His fiancée? Yes. Claire was silent for a long moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. Mom, I'm so proud of you. Proud of me? I laughed. A hollow, exhausted sound. For what? For sitting through dinner with my husband's mistress. For not letting them get away with it, Claire said. For standing up. For telling the truth. A lot of women would have stayed silent. Would have protected the family image. You didn't. I didn't have a choice, I said. Marcus deserved to know. And you deserve to be free. By Wednesday the extended family knew. Gerald's brother called him, furious. My sister drove down from Savannah to stay with me. Our church friends whispered, some sympathetic, some scandalized, all hungry for details. Gerald moved out on Friday. He rented an apartment across town, a sad beige 1-bedroom that smelled like carpet cleaner and regret. He tried to call me several times. I didn't answer. The divorce papers were filed the following week. Vanessa, true to her word, or perhaps accurate to her fear, disappeared. She quit her job, moved out of her condo, and vanished from Atlanta entirely. Some said she moved to California. Some said Florida. I didn't care. She was gone and that was enough. Marcus was the hardest part. He didn't speak to his father for 3 months. He barely spoke to me for 2. He blamed himself, irrationally, painfully, for not seeing the signs. He blamed himself for introducing her. He blamed himself for trusting her. I tried to tell him it wasn't his fault. Predators are skilled at hiding. That love makes us blind. But grief doesn't listen to logic. Takes its own time. Slowly he came back. First a text message. I'm sorry I've been distant. Then a phone call. Can I come over this weekend? Then a hug. A long, wordless hug on my front porch while the magnolia petals drifted down around us. I don't know how to process any of this, he said into my shoulder. Neither do I admitted. But we'll figure it out. Together. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I got the house. I got the savings, what was left of them after Gerald's investments in Vanessa's lifestyle. I got the magnolia tree, the grandmother's china, and the quiet mornings that were finally, truly mine. Gerald got the apartment, the guilt, the silence of a phone that no longer rang with calls from his children. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It did. Some nights, I still reached for the other side of the bed before remembering it was empty. Some mornings I still made 2 cups of coffee before catching myself. But pain and peace can coexist. I learned that. I started going to a support group for women going through divorce. I thought I'd hate it, sitting in a circle sharing my wounds with strangers. But there's something powerful about being in a room full of women who understand. Who doesn't judge. Who have walked the same broken road. I started gardening more. I planted new roses, red ones this time instead of the pink ones Gerald always preferred. I rearranged the living room. I bought new sheets for the main bedroom. Small changes, but they mattered. They marked the beginning of something new. And Marcus healed too. Slower than me but steadier. A year after that terrible dinner he started dating again. A lovely woman named Priya, a pediatric nurse with kind eyes and a warm laugh. He brought her to meet me on a Sunday afternoon. "Mom," he said, his arm around her waist. "This is Priya." I looked at her. Really looked. And I saw nothing but kindness. "Welcome to our home," I said. This time I meant it. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and the magnolia tree is swaying gently outside my window, I think about that dinner. I think about the moment she walked through my door. The moment I recognized her face. The moment I realized that everything I thought I knew, about my husband, about my marriage, about the life I had built, was a lie. I could have stayed silent, you know. A lot of women do. I could have pulled Gerald aside after dessert and confronted him privately. I could have protected the family image. I could have swallowed my pride and pretended I didn't see what I saw, didn't know what I knew. But here's what I've learned after 55 years on this earth. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects the people who hurt you. It permits them to keep hurting you, to keep lying, to keep taking pieces of your soul until there's nothing left. I didn't expose Gerald and Vanessa for revenge. I didn't do it to humiliate them or to punish them. I did it because my son deserved the truth. Because I deserved the truth. Because lies are like termites. They eat away at the foundation of your life until one day, everything collapses. The truth hurts. Lord knows it does. But the truth also heals. The truth sets you free. Not immediately, not painlessly, but eventually. Completely. I'm 55 years old now. I live alone in a house that finally feels like mine. I have a daughter who calls me every Sunday and a son who's learning to trust again. I have roses in my garden and peace in my heart. And I have something else too. Something precious. I have myself. For 32 years I was Gerald's wife. I was Marcus's mother. I was the woman who cooked and cleaned and smiled and pretended. Now for the first time in my life I am simply Lorraine. And Lorraine is enough. So I have to ask you, friend, if you were sitting at that table, if you recognized the woman on your husband's phone standing in your living room, holding your son's hand, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent? Would you have waited? Would you have asked that one question over dessert? The question that changed everything? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because there's always another story. Another woman. Another truth waiting to be told. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, the truth may hurt, but it will never betray you.